So good evening, everyone. A big thank you for inviting me in this at the symposium, and thank you for the tremendous effort for the organizers. I think my presentation will resonate a bit with Dr. Rami's presentation about Amman. So this presentation is part of a long research which I have been working on with my colleague Rania Mayad, and is expected to be published in a chapter in Riwaq's upcoming book, Palestine Modern Unfulfilled Promise. So this presentation discusses the urban and architectural history of one of Ramallah's famous streets, commonly known as Nazlat al-Barid, a sloped street where Ramallah's post office is located. This street, which was open in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and has been famous for its lush Platanus orientalis sidewalk trees and the surrounding cafes, can be seen as a microcosm of Ramallah's modern transformation. It witnessed the construction of the city's new post office in 1966, the new city hall and the municipal park in 1961, Ramallah Secondary Girls' School in 1952, the new building of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in 1962, and a number of important modernist villas and apartment buildings that were designed and built between the 1940s and the 1960s, a period that witnessed an increasing demand for designs by Palestinian and foreign architects. So the street showcases three layers of Ramallah's mid-20th century modernism. The first one is its flourishing entertainment and tourism industry, the advancement of public services and infrastructure, and the creation of new forms of social heterogeneity, neighborliness, and solidarity among residents. The community of the street has included many 1948 refugees from the coastal areas who settled in Ramallah and re-established their life and work around the city center. So our research tries to trace various historic transformation which led to the emergence of new urban milieux and forms of urban densification, as well as new modes of using space. These transformations also increase the differentiation between the public and the private, the complexity of interior spatial division, as well as the introducing new architectural language, and contributed to the development of culture and recreational life. We also try in this research to shed the light on the intertwined, centralized and decentralized processes of urban transformation in Ramallah, which started at the turn of the 20th century and intensified between 1948 and 1967. The modernization of this small town in the Eastern Mediterranean was shaped by continuous waves of connection with and separation from different geographies, mainly Jerusalem and the coastal Palestine, the United States, the Levant, and Gulf countries. So this process was also sculpted by the waves of immigration and the return of Ramallah families, as well as the reception of refugees and expatriates over many decades. But first, I think that I need to establish a little bit of context about early modernity in Ramallah in order to understand the period that we'll be focusing on in our presentation. The first section will try to situate the street features of modernism within a larger context, which shows early history of Ramallah's modern condition and manifestation. So if you see in this aerial photo, this was taken by the German Air Force at the end of World War I in late 1917, 1918, and it shows basically Ramallah and Al-Bira. If you know the twin city, it's a twin city. It's never Ramallah. It's always Ramallah and Al-Bira. So if you see at the bottom of the aerial photo, here is Al-Bira village, a typical peasant rural fabric. And there is also Ramallah here. And I'm pointing out some of the buildings that show this early condition of modernity. Well, starting by the Greek Orthodox Church in 1852, but also we're talking about modern schools, French school, girls' school between 1969 and 1889, another public school for boys by the Ottomans, built by the Ottomans in that period also. We're also talking about an Ottoman court that was later turned into a clinic in the late 19th century, and also some of the houses of the prominent houses that were later turned into hotels. An example of the Grand Hotel that was built in 1906 but became a hotel in 1931. So these are conditions that represent or can be listed as modern education as early as the mid-18th century, modern local governance when Ramallah became a sub-district center for surrounding villages in 1908 and then became a municipality in 1902 and then became a municipality in 1908. First immigration to the US in 1895, diversification of occupations including pilgrim trade and strong connection to Jerusalem. And this is reflected through modern urban transformation. So we're talking about the emergence of linear mixed-use buildings connected to the street outside the rural fabric of the typical courtyard houses. We're talking about a network of public buildings and the single houses that you see spreading outside the historic core of both villages. So if we talk about the British mandate period, I would list a few features. The first one is the electricity grid switchboard, which is called Al-Manara in 1935. The British military compound Al-Muqata in 1939, and the transformation, the transmitters, the towers for the Palestine Broadcasting Services in 1936. So the introduction of modern infrastructure has begun in 1935. There is also the emergence of a network of hotels, cafes, cinemas, representing the entertainment and modern tourism, money inflows from the diaspora, and real estate speculation, mainly after World War I, that was accompanied by modern planning, regulation, and laws. Okay, so if you want to know more about this, the built environment of Ramallah, you can see these two books, which talk about the history of the urban development of Ramallah until, I would say, 1950s. So back to this aerial photo, our site is here. This is the street that I will be talking about. Not very far from the new center that was emerged in the 1930s, Al-Manara, when both Al-Bira and Ramallah became one urban area. So this is the typical view of Ramallah in the 1940s. And we can see the site in that here. So this is, the street is still not open yet, but we can see some of the landmarks of the street, a cafe, Al Gondola Cafe and Park. We can see a reference point, which is a house built by an Armenian who came to Ramallah at the early of 1937 from Jerusalem. And he built his house, he finished his house in 1945. And this site of the municipality and the park that will be later built in the 1960s. Another view of the site. So here we can see that by that time, Ramallah the street has the Ramallah Secondary Girls School in 1955, and the same landmarks that were pointed later, before. And this is the typical postcard of Ramallah in the 1960s. So we see here another landmark of the street. I will be talking later about it. Atalla building that was built in 1959. And this is still the Armenian house of Nazarian house in 1945. And by then, this is the municipality park that was built and will be followed by the building of the city hall. Okay. So the 1960s was the peak of Ramallah's as summer resort for the elites of Palestine, Jordan, and some Arab countries. But the history of summer and leisure in the town dates back to the beginning of the 20th century as a clear example of the culture of summer leisure travel to the mountains in the Eastern Mediterranean. The work of Lisa Taraki, for example, indicates that in the 1920s, Ramallah was a center of attraction for visitors from Palestine, coastal cities, and Jerusalem. Ramallah's history as a summer resort should be understood within the modern tourism network, which was also associated with religious tourism or pilgrimage to the Holy Land. The culture of summer vacations continued in Ramallah right after the Nakba, especially with the arrival of civil flights to Al-Quds International Airport. And in an ad in the Palestine newspaper dating back to April 1952, the Ramallah municipality invites hotel and park owners to meet to discuss the organization of summer affairs. In the summer of 1961, under the pine trees of the garden of the Grand Ramallah Hotel, a few hundred meters from Nazlat al-Barid, the mayor of Ramallah, Jalil Harb, sat in an interview with Majallat al-Arab al-Kuwaitiyya, telling the magazine correspondents about the municipality's vision of the city, saying, "We seek to make our city an exemplary city and an excellent summer resort, not only for Jordan, but also for the neighboring Arab countries. We are working, the municipality council and the people, to create great, wonderful Ramallah that will be the most beautiful city in Jordan." The report of Al-Arabi magazine also include the news about the opening of the Ramallah Municipality Park in May 1961, which came in a fierce competition with Al-Bira Municipality Park that was widely known at that time, as the report described it, as the most beautiful park in Jordan. The opening of the municipal park in 1961 was, with its geometric layout, ornamental trees, and the central fountain, was a new shift of the concept of public entertainment space from that of which Ramallah had known in the previous decades, such as the garden of the Grand Ramallah Hotel. The modern landscaping found its way to house gardens in the city of Nazlat al-Barid in similar styles, through paved paths and water fountains and ornamental trees. The history of ornamental planting in Ramallah, according to Yusuf Kaddoura, dates back to the Municipal Council in 1921-1922, and its president, Yusuf Derbas, who was able to convince people to plant pine and cypress in their garden and orchards. The practice of caring for trees in gardens away from agriculture became a modernist culture, which the municipality also practiced through planting trees in the roads from that period onward. Some of these outdoor spaces planted with pines, cypresses, and fruit trees were transformed into the first generation of private parks, such as Al Gondola Cafe and Al Rukab Garden and Cafe. Ramallah of the cypress and pine. This is how Murid al-Barghouthi describes the city's greenness when he used to visit it as a teenager before his exodus in 1967. The culture of strolling in a leafy tree-lined trees, like the Radio Street or As-Sahl Street, is carved in the memory of many of who lived in the town in that period. But the lush Platanus orientalis sidewalk trees in Nazlat al-Barid had another story dating back to the 1950s. The residents of the neighborhood who lived there during that period circulate the story of Mayor Dr. Jalil Badran, who brought seedlings from one of his regular visits to Lebanon to plant them in the street. Although the document supporting this story is not available, but it's likely that the trees were planted in 1951 to 1956 during the Badran's mayorship. But we can conclude that the municipality decided to make Nazlat al-Barid a walkway or a promenade linking the city's commercial center with the municipal park and city hall. It was later called Al-Muntazah Street and still retains its official name until then. The numerous newspaper advertisements and report in 1964 about summer activities in Ramallah indicates how summer holidays in the city witnessed their peak during that period, especially at the time of the summer festival, when many parks, restaurants, and private hotels announced their services to festival visitors. The first edition of Ramallah Summer Festival in 1962 was hosted in Nazlat al-Barid, specifically the playgrounds of Ramallah Secondary Girls' School, and with the attendance of the Syrian artist Adnan Mnini. Azmi Shunnara states that Ramallah municipality had entrusted the organization of the first edition to the first Ramallah group. The municipality has sent some members of the festival committee to Lebanon to contract an artist to train youth in dabke and folk dances. In the second edition, 1963, the festival expanded, and according to a report in the Ramallah newspaper in August, the festival was attended by 30,000 people, tourists and citizens, and the activities of the summer festival continued in Ramallah until 1966 before stopping due to the 1967 war. So summer leisure and tourism that Ramallah's petit bourgeoisie sought from the beginning of the 20th century until 1967 can be viewed within the strive to establish Ramallah's urban identity with this industry as part of the city's public good, in an emulation of the experience of Lebanese cities after the independence in 1946. The inflows of expatriate money in both places played an important role in shaping this entertainment economy. What is worth exploring here is the transformation of the culture of entertainment between 1948 and 1967 into a form of mass culture which influenced the city's urban life and daily spaces, its architecture, and the social relations among the dwellers and the visitors. So the construction of Ramallah Secondary Girls' School, completed in 1952, was a milestone in the history of Nazlat al-Barid. It is the first public building after the road was built. And for some time, it was called the Female School Street. With the construction of the new Chamber of Commerce in the industry in 1962 and the new post office services in 1966, a small area of Nazlat al-Barid was turned into a service hub that moved the town into another level and created a new network of relations between the town and its surrounding refugee camps, villages, and cities. After the construction of the secondary school for boys in 1942, the municipality purchased 6 dunams to build girls' school. The cost of the school at that time was estimated to be £8,000 according to the request submitted by the Ramallah Municipality Council to the Mandate government in 1943. One of the most important manifestations of modern planning and local administration in Ramallah is the municipality's early management of its resources to provide public services such as education. In 1927, the municipality excised a 3% tax on every house appraised value. And in addition to receiving some financing from the British Mandate government, the Municipal Council mobilized financial support from the diaspora in the United States. The relationship of Ramallah Secondary Girls' School with Ramallah Municipality is one of a network of relationships that the municipality produced through its contribution to a number of institutions, projects, services, and cultural programs during that period, such as the hospital, Ramallah Library, and a series of public colleges, schools, and festivals. This was accompanied by continuous mobilization of societal and financial support in Ramallah and from the diaspora in the United States. So the school, which was completed in 1952, began to receive its students from the city, including refugees and also the neighboring villages and cities, including Jerusalem. In few decades, the school in Nazlat al-Barid has turned into an educational, cultural, voluntary, and vocational space, evidenced by the extent of the extracurricular and curricular activities that appear in many archival materials. The school was able to bring urban life inside its walls. Its location, structure, and large external spaces contributed to the school's networking with the urban world around it. The exhibitions and the activities held at the school during the summer festival in the 1960s played an important role in this. Community education initiatives during that period, the period of the Israeli military rule, were an important part of the school's history. According to the educator Munir Fashe, the idea of science clubs in the school of the West Bank began in the 70s in Ramallah Secondary's girls' school. So moving to the new municipality site at the end of the street, one can see how the architectural language of the new municipality or the city hall, designed by engineer Rizq Khouri, provided new vocabulary functions and meanings for what a city hall can contribute to the image of the city. Several additions were made to the building during the subsequent years, including adding floors and foundation of the municipal theater that was not completed until 2017. The mural designed and executed by artist Issam Badr can be considered one of the most important elements of the building. The main facade overlooking Jaffa Street was developed in the 80s, and the mural was added to the building as a background to the park. According to the writer Lana Badr, the mural was a ceramic sculpture made of pottery with bronze glazing, and it consisted of 8 figures representing Palestinian popular patriotic symbols with modernist content. Here, it is worth comparing the visual language and symbolic representations of Issam Badr mural with the Monument of Freedom in Tahrir Square in Baghdad by the Iraqi artist Jawad Salim, one of the founders of Baghdad Group for Modern Art. Jawad Salim taught Issam Badr during his study at the College of the Fine Arts in Baghdad. But the identity of the new city hall differed from the first official municipal building, built in the Mandate period in 1935, which is still located inside the old town. The old municipality was characterized by modern features at that time with relationship with the street, and its definition as a multi-use building that contains a vegetable market on the ground floor directly connected to the street, while the first floor contained a meeting room covered by concrete waffle structure and a large pitched roof. While in the new town hall, we can find another understanding of the concept of public mixed-use building. In place of commercial activities, bureaucratic municipal offices were integrated with cultural and recreational services, the park, the theater, the mural, and a large public meeting room. So the street residents, along with engineers and architects, have contributed to the formation of the streetscape and architectural image as a product of their different lifestyles and modes of living, their dreams and aspirations, and the display of capabilities of architects. So the social fabric of Nazlat al-Barid residents reflected the social differentiation that had risen in the Ramallah local community since the 1920s. In our research, we focus on 3 groups of the street community. The first is the Ramallah families who built independent houses in the first decades of the 20th century. It is interesting to highlight that this segment included Mr. Hamper Nazalian Yusuf al-Armani, a copper pleacher from Suq al-Nahassin in Jerusalem, and the Nazarin Jubran family, which came in the early 1940s. In an indication to cities' openness to newcomers in the decades before 1948. But the second group of the street dwellers emerged after the arrival of thousands of in 1948 from the cities of Haifa, Jaffa, Ramle, and Lid. A group of refugees rented flats from Ramallah's families, transforming the rental culture from which prevailed in the 1930s and 1940s for summering purposes. The third group is a group of families who worked in trade, including the families of Atallah, As-Salti, and Kishek, who moved to the neighborhood from the cities like Jerusalem and Jaffa after Nakba 1948 and the War of 1967, and were, due to their trade, on a degree of openness to Arab and foreign countries, and consequently built independent houses with architectural styles unique to the street and the town. In 1959, Atallah building of 5 apartments was built to accommodate 4 brothers, their families, and their Cypriot mother. According to Khamis, a member of the family, they moved there from Jerusalem in 1969, where the family worked in souvenir trade in the old city. Khamis explained how his family business brought them into contact with many tourists, including an Italian architect who designed Atallah building in 1959 and whose name remains unknown. The Atallah building created a major shift in the street's residential architecture. Its 4 floors were built all at once, unlike the other similar apartment buildings in the street, where floors were added gradually, as you were talking earlier in the previous presentation, over the years. The building was not built for the purpose of renting to others. Rather, it was owned by one family that shared its facilities, such as staircase, the garden, the roof, the washing area. The 5 apartments even shared one telephone line, which was installed in the staircase. Atallah's family lived inside a modern building, but as an extended family who had moved as a cohesive social unit to a new neighborhood in a new town. The Atallah building remains a unique architectural model, both functionally and visually. The staircase and the apartment building of Khamis' parents feels like a time capsule from the mid-20th century. Most of their interior elements were conserved, including tiles, doors, windows, handrails, furniture, sanitary fittings, wallpaper, and accessories that were all imported from outside Palestine during the construction. The plan of Atallah's building took a linear shape and produced the corridor element, along which apartment spaces were distributed. Looking for symmetry, in this case, in this sense, has become a functional solution rather than aesthetic value. Linearity was also reflected on the external facades and the form of balconies. To break this strong linearity, red cement panels carrying metal planters were added, and the staircase has become a key architectural element in breaking this linearity. As for the exterior spaces, there is no longer an orchard or what we call hakura to grow fruits or vegetables, but rather a meticulously designed space with tiled corridors and planters, a fountain, a shaded area raised on cylindrical columns, pilates, used as parking lots. This space hosted most of the extended family's occasions, such as parties and families and meetings during the holidays. Across the street from Atallah building lies the Salti Villa, a long mass of stone and concrete, which appears to be raised on a 45-centimeter cylindrical column. Similar to Atallah building, the villa's aesthetics has been part of the street's image for decades, with its horizontal facades and the high contrast of facade elements, its red concrete planters and breeze block works. Raja Salti, the owner of the villa, comes from a Jerusalemite family who owned a construction metal store in Jerusalem. His family was one of the few who remained in West Jerusalem neighborhood of Al-Baqa following the occupation of the city in 1948. Raja himself moved to Ramallah and married the daughter of one of the families living in Nazlet al-Barid, Renee Jobran, whose family came from Nazareth in 1940s. During his family business in the steel trade, due to his family business in the steel trade, Raja decided to study civil engineering in the States. And when Raja decided to build his house, one of his friends advised him to go to architect Hani Arafat. an architect from Nablus who graduated in 1955 from Cairo University. Indeed, Raja went to Hani Arafat, who designed the house in 1966. The construction began in 1967, but Raja and his family moved to their house before the construction was completed for the fear that the house might be taken by the Israeli soldiers after the occupation of the city in June of the same year. Architect Arafat designed a villa which consists of two residences, one on the ground level and the other as a basement. The architect decided that the ground floor should be raised 60 centimeters higher than the street level. Raja had to buy a mound needed to raise the ground floor from the contractor who was responsible for excavating the land of the new municipality at the end of the street. He sold him the site's earth mound for 1 Jordanian dinar. On the other hand, Arafat was very careful with the design of verandas on the southern and western facades, which were meant to be socially interactive spaces with increased openness to the outside. These verandas became thresholds that allowed the emergence of contact between residents and passerbys, especially since both facades overlook Nazlat al-Barid and the girls' school. There is no doubt also that Raja Salti's trade in steel and his study of civil engineering played a key role in the structural system of the villa. He was very proud while telling us about the use of 22 millimeter steel bars in one of the reinforced concrete beams, something that could not be found in the town except in the building of Cinema Al-Walid, which was built in 1955 by Walid Saad al-Din, another tenant of Nazlat al-Barid. Until the 1940s, single houses in Ramallah retained the liwan as a central space and a distributor to the various rooms of the house, but the years of the 50s and the 60s witnessed the development of more complex and less central layouts. And this can be seen in the plan of Salti Villa, where the circulation space varied between a small liwan and a long corridor. In this case, the liwan element did not disappear, but rather was connected to another element of circulation, what created hierarchy and privacy of spaces. Both Atallah and As-Salti buildings promoted the modern language of construction materials from reinforced concrete, as well as architectural elements without decoration in its traditional concept. They reinforced the horizontal language of the external facades using longitudinal verandas and many long horizontal architectural details. So to finish, there is a quote by the writer Mahmoud Shker in Arabic, so I'm going to read in Arabic, بالعربي, because I think the translation, it will be lost in translation. صغيرة لا تعقيد فيها ولا اضطراب، ويبدو عليها أنها مكتفية بنسائها ورجالها وبمن يأتيها من القرى المجاورة من رجال ونساء، يأتونها للعمل والبيع والشراء أو لمجرد التمتع بزياراتها والتردد على مطاعمها ومقاهيها. كانت رام الله تحيا حياة بسيطة آنذاك، ولم يمنعها ذلك من مراكمة مزيد من الصفات التي تجعلها المدينة مدينة بحق. فثمة مهرجان غنائي صيفي يجري تنظيمه كل عام، ومطاعم وفنادق ومنتزهات ودور للسينما وشركات ومصانع صغيرة وأخرى متوسطة، وصلات حية للمدينة بأبنائها المغتربين في المهجر. وثمة قدر من الانفتاح الذي يكفل قدرا من الحريات ولو باعتدال. لكن هزيمة حزيران مرة أخرى جاءت لتكسر الكثير من التوقعات والأمل. شكرا.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you for bringing this quote and this oral history that is definitely part of documentation on urban history. Thank you. Anybody has a question to Lana? Rami.
Thank you, Lana. And I was really fascinated with your presentation. وحسيت إنه I can draw so many parallels with Amman. And this is what I want to talk about, actually. And I've written some notes. I was going to talk about small villages turning into urban centers, but I will skip that because I think there's much more interesting things to say. And for me, it's the nature of the public space and how public space can be appropriated. So within these two cities, Ramallah, Al-Bira, Twin Cities, and Amman, I can see the importance, and I witnessed that in Amman, the importance of the street. The streets that is shaded by the pine and the conifer trees, and the interaction of that street with even with the houses, with this interactive interface, where the verandas of houses are actually an extension to the public space itself. For me, this is fascinating, and this is something that I found a bit more specific to Amman, but I'm very happy to see that there are the parallels with Ramallah, and also how public space informally can be appropriated, because the two cities can talk about, if I would say, flexible adaptation, where, for example, schools after hours can serve for different functions and so on. And we lived that in Amman at a certain point. So I felt that the whole concept of how public space is defined and appropriated, and the extension of the public realm into the private realm of the verandas, of the terraces, of the setback, من خلال this interactive interface is mostly fascinating. And I think the two cities share that. And another thing that I felt is important is, again, I'll refer to my paper on domesticated modernity. I mean, the building of the municipality is most fascinating because I can see, also two parallels with Amman, how this domesticated modernity was interplayed within the dual usage of stone and concrete, within the context of these two cities. And also, how does, for example, Art Deco in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s is interplaying with these two materials, and especially with the concrete. Art Deco in concrete is extremely fascinating, to me at least. And finally, I wanted to say one last comment. I don't have a question, it's just observations. One last comment is regarding how I started my lecture with the painting of Muhanna Durra, symbolizing how Amman is entering modernity with his mural. And where is this mural being placed and drawn? It's in the Syndica of Engineering and Architects, and actually the Syndica building that also includes doctors, all the professionals. But then, unfortunately, that was removed. And to see how a nation, through the representation of the nation, is using contemporary abstract art and also sculpture, and the same example that we saw in the municipality is extremely fascinating. We don't see that anymore, unfortunately. And I think it's very important to revisit that history and to learn from it. So I can see all of these parallels, whether it's Art Deco in stone, the appropriation of public space, and appropriating and thinking that contemporary art is the media that can represent the nation, basically, is extremely compelling for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rami. Eli?
Again, it's not a question, but I don't know if you intended it or not, but for me, this wasn't a paper presentation. It was a performance. The level of detail by which I know this street now, knowing that I've never been to Ramallah or anywhere close, is amazing. I feel I have neighbors. The tone by which you presented the family names, the exact details that we might consider mundane or irrelevant. As an architect, I might say that maybe most of these buildings for me would be non-iconic and by nature maybe not worthy of being given so much time. But the way you've put this story, or the story of the life of this street in this whole presentation is really impressive. Again, I'm not sure if this was calculated or not, but the result is the same. It's really nice. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. One last one, please.
It is a comment, actually. I've been following this paper before, but the fascinating issue is about the Nakba. The Nakba is there, but immediately the Palestinians were not waiting. We're not waiting for the UNRWA, not waiting for the humanitarian assistance. They were helping each other. They were building municipalities. They were building villas, schools for the girls, syndicates, post office, and things were emerging. It's not like the Nakba was the end of the Palestinians. And I think this presentation shows a lot that the Palestinians were on move, not on a static condition. Thank you, Lana. I cannot add to Eli praising of the presentation. It's fascinating.
But just to continue on that, just the fact that there was no analysis, there's no interpretation. She was just telling you all the facts in detail, even to the size of the reinforcement, steel reinforcement of the concrete, and then leaves it up to you to interpret, to react. I mean, this is art for me.
Okay, thanks. Sure. Yalla. Thank you very much, Lana.